Hello everyone, and welcome to my little video. My name's Jock Sarong. I am a guest. I would have been a guest at the Right Around the Murray Festival this year, but of course the world has gone sideways on us, and here we all are on our screens. I've been asked to make a video for you along the lines of the theme for this year's festival, which is the things we love. And I guess a lot like you, I love books. So what I thought I'd do is I'm going to introduce you to my 50 favourite books. And I'm going to do this in 5 minutes. So that's 10 books a minute, a book every 6 seconds. I have a timer in front of me, which I'm going to set off in a second, and we're going to go through the 50. There are a couple of little rules to this. One is that these are in no particular order. Another is that some of my favourite books are not here. They're in the hands of my friends, they're in other houses, they are lost. So we'll just work with what we've got. And I have not scripted this at all, so this could go absolutely anywhere. Anyway, while I'm talking to you, I'm going to set up the timer. Righto. And let's do this. First up, On the Beach by Nevil Shute. Don't read this in the midst of a pandemic. It's terrifying and beautifully written. He's an engineer. He's very, very crisp. Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan came out, I think, last year. Beautiful coming-of-age story about English rock music fans. I think I'm winning. This isn't too hard. Wake in Fright, Kenneth Cook. I read this on a hammock in a boat in Indonesia in blistering heat, and I had chills. It is terrifying. It's not a thick book. It's a really quick read, but it is suspense done perfectly. Sea Fishes of Southern Australia, Swainston and Hutchins. This is a fish ID book. Absolutely brilliant for fishing. I bought that when I bought my first hand spear so that I wouldn't shoot anything that I couldn't eat. It was a gesture towards sustainability. The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. Written in the 40s, censored by the Soviets until the 60s. Jagger and Richards used it as the basis for Sympathy for the Devil. It's Russian, and yet it's hilarious. 7/10 by James Hamilton Paterson, the book that changed my life, caused me to quit my job and go searching for beaches ever after. It's non-fiction. It's a book of essays and meditations about the ocean and the way that humans relate to it psychologically. It's beautiful. He's a mystic. There's a lot of deep thinking to do in this book. And it's now 30 years old and yet very, very prescient in environmental terms. Conundrum by Jan Morris. The story of her transition, her gender transition, written in the 70s, terrifyingly honest and amazing what she went through. Pour Me a Life by A.A. Gill. This is a memoir of Gill. Gill was an English journalist. He died in 2016. This was a memoir of his struggle with alcoholism, the pun being in the title. And he's a very, very funny man, but equally an interesting look at the emotional dependency of alcoholics between them and their families. Beyond Words, Jacqueline Kent. Going back to Kenneth Cook, the author of Wake in Fright, a beautiful memoir of the year that she lived with him shortly before his very, very sudden death. She's a wonderful, wonderful writer, and I'd like to find more of her stuff. Mark Lanigan's I Am the Wolf, Lyrics and Writings. If you like Lanigan's music, then this will need no introduction at all, but I'm always interested in how lyrics work as poetry once you take away the cheat factor of the music itself, and it turns out Lanigan is indeed a poet. I wonder how I'm going. Port Fairy Murders, Robert Gott. Robert Gott is a beautiful writer. He's the writer's writer. He does everything perfectly. And of course, when he wrote a book based in Port Fairy, that was always going to be a sure thing, and indeed it is. There's a whole series of these, and they're all as good as this one, but this is a good place to start. Emma Viskich, Resurrection Bay. Again, the start of a trilogy about a deaf detective called Caleb Zellick. Emma does suspense brilliantly. It's very Aussie, it's very bush noir, all those classic things. Tell you what just happened. A text came into my phone, so now I can't see the timer. Things get interesting. Okay. Mark Smith, again, Australian writer, based in Ocean Grove, Anglesey. This is the start of a trilogy for young adults, the Road to Winter trilogy, about the aftermath of a pandemic on this coast. There's all sorts of things popping into the computer now. It's getting more and more confusing. But Mark is a surfer, and there's a little bit of a fantasy element here in how he would like the world to be if there were no other surfers in the water. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. A letter to his son about racism in America, extremely informative about how it feels to be under the yoke of white America, and probably lots and lots of analogies for Australian experience as well. I picked up Consider the Lobster by David Foster Wallace because the title essay, Consider the Lobster, is a marvellous meditation on the ethics of eating animals. Without being pious at all, it's really quite hysterical. Power Without Glory by Frank Hardy. Beautiful reminiscences on the way that Richmond and Kew and Collingwood used to be. And all of those fascinating links. Hardy was tried for criminal defamation over the characters in this book and their resemblance to real and living people. But it's also just a ripping yarn. What happened then? Oh, maybe I said it for 5 seconds. I don't know. Was that 5 minutes? That can't be 5 minutes. This is outrageous. I'm going to keep going. The Fight, Norman Mailer, about the rumble in the jungle in Zaire. It's a perfect companion piece to the film When We Were Kings. Steve Toltz, A Fraction of the Whole, epic Australian novel, highly satirical about a prominent family, really funny. Death of a River Guide by Flanagan. How could you possibly pass up Flanagan in this list? I think this is the best of his work. See how I'm going faster now? Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky. I love all the Russians because they're so damn serious. But Crime and Punishment is the granddaddy of all crime fiction. It's beautifully constructed. The murder's on page 50 or so, but there's 500 pages of rumination about what it means to be a murderer. Moby Dick. Similar reasons. It's an epic. Everything's based around it. It's where we all started, I suppose. The Sheltering Sky by Paul Bowles. I read this just before I went to Morocco. Don't do that. It makes Morocco even more scary. The Merry-Go-Round in the Sea by Randolph Stowe. Randolph Stowe, to me, is like the spiritual godfather of Tim Winton. West Australian, really intensely limestone and blistering heat. Recollections of a Bleeding Heart, Don Watson. Biography of Keating. Insightful, close quarters, beautifully written. I'm running out of space on this side. I've got to find somewhere to put the books. They're going on the floor. Ladies and Gentlemen of the Jury is a collection of jury addresses by lawyers all the way down through history. As boring as a book about lawyers sounds, there's some wonderful, wonderful rhetoric in this book. Infinite Jest, David Foster Wallace. Very unfashionable to read David Foster Wallace these days, but when half the book, which is massive, is written in footnotes that are hysterically funny, and there's no discernible plot to this thing, it's worth the test. A Box of Matches, Nicholson Baker. Insomniac, wakes up and writes at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and each morning he's got to light a little fire to warm himself up because he lives in Maine where it's very snowy. Peaceful, meditative, quite thin. The Crimes of Sheila McGough by Janet Malcolm. Janet Malcolm is an ethicist concerned with journalism as well as a wonderful writer, quite separately with that. American Journeys, Don Watson. He sits on trains, he talks to ordinary Americans about the experience of being American. It's an outsider's view. It's wonderful. Deep Time Dreaming. This is not the cover of Deep Time Dreaming. This is a facsimile stuck to a notebook because my friend hasn't given the book back. It's a history of Australian archaeology written by Billy Griffiths. I think we'll be hearing more from him. He writes beautifully. The Name of the Rose, Umberto Eco. When it was made into a film, it was the ugliest cast ever assembled. This is intricate. It takes a lot of concentration. Eco was a genius. He wants you to know he was a genius. The Lost Arabs by Omar Saker. I toured with Omar Saker a couple of years ago. He's a very, very powerful performance poet. If ever you get the chance to see him, see him. Tasmanian Aborigines, Lyndall Ryan, also published as The Aboriginal Tasmanians some years previously. It's a thing we need to know a lot more about, the story of colonialism and its impact on the Palawa and Pakana people, and Lyndall Ryan is the authority on the subject, in my view. Nostromo. lost the, I can't see it anymore. Nostromo, Conrad, what am I doing? Bolivian silver mines, cruelty, again, colonialism at its rampant worst, and the fact that Conrad was writing this in his second language is something that still staggers me. Humboldt's Gift by Saul Bellow. Written in 1976, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, this won the Pulitzer, and I named my son after Humboldt because I think this is almost the perfect novel. Tinkering, John Clarke, a collection of his hysterical work. Do I need to say any more about John Clarke and how bloody marvellous he is? One of them just fell on the floor, you may have noticed. Carrie Tiffany, Exploded View. Short, compact, uses language very, very sparsely. This is genuinely unsettling, an account of domestic violence and a teenager who fights back in a most unexpected fashion. Confessions of an English Opium Eater. If you've ever wondered why people are so terrified of opiate addiction, this is written in the 1700s and they were already talking about it. Greased Ochre by Patsy Cameron is her thesis, and it's an account of settlement in the Furneaux Islands in Bass Strait, which is a place very close to my heart. And Patsy Cameron is a descendant of the Pakana peoples, and she writes with great authority on the topic and on the geography. The Old Man and the Sea. You can read it yourself, you can read it to your kids. I have a terrifying feeling that this edition is very valuable and it's really smashed up because I don't look after it. But what an amazing story. The Rain Heron, Robbie Arnott. Should have won every award in Australia. It nearly did. It's a modern fable. He's a Tasmanian, but this book is global. It could be set almost anywhere. And Robbie Arnott is an imaginative genius, in my view. Helen Garner, Yellow Notebook. It's just wonderful to watch Helen Garner watching life. That's all this book is, but she watches it with such extraordinary acuity. I wonder how many minutes we're up to now. I've got a feeling we left 5 behind a long time ago. Joan Didion, Play It As It Lays. Joan Didion is. There's a great doco about her on Netflix. She's a journalist, a wonderful writer. This is a cruel and unsparing view of a very, very lonely character. Weep in Silence is enormous. You can use it to prop up your table. It's the collected diaries of George Augustus Robinson when he was in charge of the Wyberlina settlement on Flinders Island, and it forms the backbone of the novel that I'm currently writing. It is an extraordinarily scary, real-time account of colonialism at its worst. Stray Dog Winter, David Francis. David Francis is an Australian equestrian, author, and lawyer currently living in Los Angeles. Wish he was back here because he's enormously entertaining company, and this is a very dark novel about Soviet Russia. Australia Day, Melanie Cheng. Melanie Cheng has an amazing ability to wreak emotion out of very, very simple situations. She's a GP, she brings empathy and insight to her writing, and she's also a very, very good live performer of her own work. Blood Meridian. Every writer will tell you this is the best novel they've read because it is. It's brutal, violent. It's the story of scalpers wandering across the American desert in the 19th century. Cormac McCarthy does not miss. Size of Thoughts is a collection of essays by Nicholson Baker, the guy who wrote Book of Matches that I was telling you about before. The best essay in this is an essay about which punctuation mark is the coolest one, and the winner, by the way, is the semicolon. 2 to go. Life, Keith Richards. I think this may have been ghostwritten by a team of about 48 freelance writers. Keith Richards is a genius. He's also one of the most selfish people I've ever read about. But there's a lot of good musicology in this book, which is a bit that I really liked. And the lucky last, and it probably should be number 1 because it's fallen randomly that way, The Dig Tree by Sarah Murgatroyd. Sarah Murgatroyd was a young BBC journalist who came to Australia to explore the story of Burke and Wills, wrote a book about it. She was dying while she wrote the book, and you can sense that between the lines. It's a wonderful account of a piece of Australian history that we all think we know about. There it is. I've probably taken about 48 minutes, but that was my 50 favourite books, done in no order at all, and with several of my favourites missing anyway, and there are no lenses in these glasses in case you're wondering about that. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great festival in whatever way it is that you can enjoy it. Cheers to you. Bye.